Hello, hello. Thank you everybody for being here today. Today we're lucky enough to get to speak with Rita Evermoore, author of Fables and Falsehoods. And just before we even get into it, the cover art is stunning, and I know you're an artist, obviously. But there's just so many elements of the story that I loved. It felt so cozy. It felt like a book within a book. It was a really nice kind of coming of age story as well for Amber, the protagonist. And just paired with the artistic rendition throughout, it felt like a very nice story to both get lost in, but at the same time, it feels like you kind of grow within the story. Like you grow as the protagonist grows. And I think that that's a very, very impactful, well, it was a very impactful story for myself. And I'm just very grateful. So thank you so much for joining us.
Absolutely.
So there's just so many different things we want to get into. And the biggest question I had just from the start is what is your experience or history background with art and writing? Because obviously there is a relationship between illustrative art and writing. They're both different forms of artwork, but we see in Fables and Falsehoods, both in the note you featured, every chapter header, which I can pull up here, like each chapter had its own little header like that. Um, what's how did you find the crossover? Did the art come first or did the story come first or where was your inspiration from all that?
The story came first, and honestly, this was probably the first big art project that I took on. I've always done art. I have pictures back from when I was a kid drawing Mickey Mouse and not with a stencil or anything, just from memory.
Mhm.
But I wanted to be able to do my own cover art for these projects, partly because art is expensive
Mhm.
and I was gonna either do it myself or pay an artist, and I didn't have the funds for that. So I've always thought that I'm not a good enough artist. And this was kind of a big test of like, can I put together a composition that works well for a cover? And I think it's so interesting in the process, and you see this both with writing and with art. There's the ugly phase where you think it's the worst thing you've ever created in your life. And then you keep working on it, you take a step back, you come back to it. The processes are very similar. The whole idea of taking a book and putting it in a drawer for a little while and coming back to it. It's the same thing with art. Sometimes you'll squint at art. I also do oil painting. So, and I wear contacts. So sometimes I'll take my contacts out so
Mhm.
that it blurs everything so that I can see better how to do lighting.
Oh, that's interesting. As someone who wears contacts, if I take my contacts out, I'm blind as a bat. Um, but that's a really cool art process that I wouldn't even consider that because it does give you a different view of things, a different perspective.
Yeah, and a big problem with most art, but oils in particular, is going too granular too quickly. You need to
Okay.
block things in. And the process for doing this cover was similar because I was coming from that kind of artwork. Um, where I blocked in all the color, I made sure the composition worked before I started doing any of the details. It still took
Mhm.
me a lot of time because it was the first time I've done it, but it I didn't waste as much time doing details on things that I ended up painting over.
That's fair. I mean, I guess my follow-up to that is because again, I adore I'll keep bringing it up. I adore the cover. Was this your when you came for the idea of it? Was this always the original, what it was going to look like, or did you see many drafts throughout? And like, it's one thing to have a draft, but like very different directions.
Yeah, so I started with some thumbnail sketches. I actually did some physical sketches with, and then some gouache paint on top. At
Mhm.
first, it was going to be a fairy ring with
Okay.
mushrooms,
Yeah, yeah.
but that didn't quite fit what I was going for. And so it did go through multiple different iterations, and finally I landed on the candles. Um, and then it kind of developed as I went, but I always knew I wanted the pages to come flying out of a teacup because tea is important both for the book and for branding purposes. Um, but I also then had all these chapter headings. So I was like, what if I could kind of incorporate that into the front cover in some way?
Mhm.
Um, so I was able to kind of manipulate those drawings after I had them to fit on each page, and take some of the
Yeah.
more important ones because I wanted Easter eggs. I saw other authors that had Easter eggs as like, oh, well, you don't know what it means until you read the book. And then you look
Mhm.
back at it and you're like, oh, wow, that I didn't even get. And it takes on new meaning.
100%. And I've always loved a story that like obviously people say don't judge a book by its cover. We all do. I'm not going to pretend we don't. We all do. And, to an extent, especially in the indie and the self-publishing sphere, it's important to because a lot of back to your point of getting cover art is expensive. A lot of it is a question of how much you're willing and or able to invest and how much you're willing to learn. Like sometimes you just see books that have generic stock images as cover art or whatnot, but you do have to stand out. The unfortunate reality is if a story is on a table with 15 other stories, the first thing people see is the cover, and you have to be convinced by the cover enough to read the blurb. So the blurb, as important as it is, it comes second to the actual cover because the cover is what gets your foot in the door. Uh,
Yeah. A lot of people they go the route of making it similar to other things in the genre, which is important for marketing. You want to look at it and be like, oh, that's a cozy mystery.
mhm.
But and it's the same thing with writing the book. You need that strange attractor, something that sets you apart. Like one thing I did for this was I made my own font. I hand drew the font. So it's slightly wibbly.
The font
Um,
of the story or the font of the cover?
the font on the cover,
Oh,
actually
okay.
both the Fables and Falsehoods and then also Rita Evermoore, those were hand drawn fonts. So I actually each
Okay.
of those letters drew out.
That's
Um,
really neat.
because I wanted it to kind of have a little bit of like a homespun kind of feel
Mhm.
where kind of leaning into it being indie rather than
Cool.
obviously I've done everything to make it look as professional as possible, but I wanted it to be kind of whimsical because that's what the story is.
Well, 100%. I think that that's definitely to your credit there and to your point of you want it to feel indie, and that is how indie goes. Indie gives you the creativity to go to whatever direction you want. Like if you want the cover art to be a huge Easter egg, if you want chapter headers to be Easter eggs, if you want to, instead of listing your chapters as chapter one, two, if you want to name them a quote from, you have all this opportunity and all of these potential possibilities that on one hand, it is incredibly overwhelming because at the end of the day, you are but one person. And to your point of I want to get cover art's expensive, going to do it myself. There's a lot of different things you have to learn throughout the process, which I think is the direction that writing is trending in, just in terms of you've got to learn how to be your own everything. And I think it's also just a good learning experience, even if you end up going a trad publishing route or whatnot, of now you know what it takes to make cover art. Now you know what it takes to format a book. Because otherwise, I think a lot of people go into it blind. And I don't want to say naive because naive has a negative connotation. But, a lot of artists and authors, they write because they have a story to tell, because they have a dream to chase. And a lot of people can take advantage of that. And then lo and behold, they're charging X amount for something that should only cost Y amount. And you don't know that until you've actually gone through and experienced how much things should actually, or what the processes are actually like.
Yeah, I mean, when I was looking at different editors, the span of how much people cost, like how much they charge, was ridiculously wide. Some people were
Mhm.
saying I needed like 6 cents a word. Some were
Yeah.
saying fractional cents. And it's really hard when you have all of these different people saying different things of being like, well, I don't want to get an editor that's not going to edit my book well, but I
Right.
also don't want to spend so much money that I could buy a car with it, you know?
Well, and that's
So,
and that's the kind of harrowing aspect of all of this is that not all indie stories are created equal. You have some indie stories where it is truly just the author doing it all themselves. And then you have some indie stories where the authors have more resources and have been able to hire a cover artist and a professional editor and a formatter and this and that. And it's not to say that the substance of the story is any different, but from a presentation perspective, it does. And then from a presentation perspective, coming back to you do judge a book by its cover. It all links in. So I think it's an interesting direction it's all trending in, but it is really uplifting to see an artist that, well, I say artist as both author and artist, but as an author who has been able to create their own artwork and been able to incorporate it into the story in the capacity at which you did. And no, it's just really it's a breath of fresh air. And hats off to you because it's one thing to say that and the artwork is terrible. The artwork is fantastic. Like I absolutely loved it.
That's good to hear because you create something and you're like, I think this is good.
Mhm.
Sometimes I think it's not good. It's nice to hear when other people like it.
Well, it's one of those things that art and, again, from a writing perspective and an illustrative perspective is incredibly subjective. And this is just
Absolutely.
something we have to deal with as curators, is that stories that we think are fantastic, my favorite books are very different from Steve's favorite books. And you have to kind of find that balance and recognize, okay, I might not love the direction of the story, but I can still appreciate that it's incredibly well written and like has a very valid, like it's a great story. It's just not a story for me. So it's like putting that aside and being like, I can still accept and appreciate this art for what it is, even if it isn't necessarily my style.
Right. Yeah.
Um, so one of the things I wanted to ask from, I guess, aside from the artwork, which is, a lot of where my mind goes because it's really cool. It's a very seasonal story. You
Hmm.
have, it's the color scheme of the art. It's kind of the vibe of the cozy little town. The protagonist's name is Amber. Um, Was this all by design? Was this all intentional?
Yes. So whenever I came up with the idea for these stories, because it is the
Mhm.
beginning of a series,
Yeah.
I wanted it to be seasonal. I I love fall. It's my favorite season, so I had to start there. Um, and it also gave me a deadline, a hard
Mhm.
and fast deadline, because if I missed it, I had to wait another year.
That's a good point.
I couldn't push it back. So I had a very specific target window and I stuck to it because I had to.
Mhm.
And I think as when you have nobody waiting on your book, you it's very easy to push it back.
Yeah.
So I wanted to make it so the deadline was actually something concrete. But also, I just wanted to tell stories that were fit for different seasons because there are a lot of people that are mood readers that like to read. And also, there are people that will read fall out of season. So, it being the
Yeah.
first book, I'm like, sometimes it's the middle of summer and I'm like, I wish it was fall. And you can pick up a book and go there. And
It's a form of escapism, 100%. It's an
exactly.
option for you.
Yeah, so that's part of why I started with fall. And the second one, which comes out very shortly
Mhm.
in, I don't know when this is going live, but
I
on
mean,
February,
this will go live in a few days.
yeah, so February 10th, book two
Okay.
will be out. And that
Nice.
is my spring, but it's winter going into spring
Okay.
book.
Exciting.
So, yeah.
Exciting. Oh man, yeah, I can't wait. Um, I guess on the topic of fall, Steve had a mandatory question of where do you stand on the pumpkin spice latte? I don't drink coffee, so I can't take a part of this. Steve thinks they're overrated.
I've never had one.
Never mind, we'll throw that
Um,
question out the window.
I'm a mocha latte or black coffee drinker.
Fair.
So or tea.
Uh,
I love tea. Tea is my
yeah,
favorite.
that's
So,
valid. Um, so I think one of the reasons why Fables and Falsehoods stood out is that, and I think I already asked you at least a briefer version of this prior to, but it's the idea of it's a story written within a story. You have Amber who's going off and basically, I don't want to say one last hurrah, but like this is her last opportunity to also, if you're watching the interview and you haven't read the book, go back and read the book because there's going to be spoilers. Um, but this is Amber's last opportunity to kind of, I don't want to say make it, but kind of step away from the more traditional route that's being pushed on her and that society is pushing on her. And power to her. Um, but because of that, she finds herself in a cozy town. She's trying to write a story. trying to be an author. How much of yourself did you find yourself like? How much did you find you channeling yourself into Amber in that regard?
So much.
Yeah.
Probably too much. Um, yeah, I mean, you get to a point with submitting stuff, short stories and books and whatnot, where you're just like, ugh, I've sent it to everybody and they all hate it. And
Mhm,
I've tried. And sometimes you just want to go and retreat and write something new.
mhm.
And I think I poured a lot of that feeling, but it's also the feeling of wishing I'd just taken 4 years instead of going to college and just gotten to write.
Yeah.
So I could give that to her and see what might have happened. I also got to give her the magic that I always wanted to find hidden behind every cupboard. And, I grew up with Narnia and I was hoping to open a wardrobe and walk right into a fantasy world. And she kind of does that when she steps into a new town.
Mhm,
And I think framing it as somebody who's already predisposed to believing it is interesting because most people would just be like, I'm just going to get out of here. This is all very strange. But yes, she has a lot of me. And there's the neurodivergent aspect as well,
mhm,
which she has. So I find that it's very difficult for me to not write neurodivergent characters as somebody who is.
mhm.
As much as a neurotypical person has struggles in writing neurodivergent folks, they it's the reverse too. Like I
Mhm.
don't know how to get into the mind of somebody who is neurotypical.
Yeah. I mean, that makes sense. We write what we know. And I think I'm not a writer, so I can't speak much of it, but I can say I know there's a lot of kind of I don't even want to know the right word is stigma, but there's right and wrong ways to write about groups of people or like men writing about from perspective of women or vice versa, whatnot. There's more tasteful and less tasteful ways to do it. So I think kind of like the easiest way to go about it is just stick to what you know, write what you know. Because at the end of the day, you want your characters to be relatable. And as someone who I think I'm pretty confident I'm neurotypical. As someone who is neurotypical, I feel like there's a lot that you could identify in Amber, and I think that those are the best kind of characters. It doesn't necessarily matter what walk of life you walk, there's still something relatable, whether it's a personality quirk, that's the word, whether it's personality quirk or like where you're at in life or just this or that. There's whatever makes a story and a character more relatable is what keeps, at least for me, what keeps me completely locked in as a reader. Because then you find yourself starting to root for these characters and rooting for them because you see a little bit of yourself in them. Because you want to root for yourself as well. And a lot of people won't root for themselves, but they'll root for someone else. So you just got to go for it.
Absolutely. And there's a thing in writing of writing specifically because there are truths that are universal.
Mhm.
So people will relate to them whether it's their experience or it reminds them of their experience. I remember learning that in one of my writing classes about how if you try to go too general, no one's going to relate to it because it's just going to be nothing.
Yeah.
So going into and it is writing what you know. I can only really write from my experience or from anything else is going to be third hand. It's not going to be it's going to be from somebody else that I'm just regurgitating. So I'd rather write something that's me.
And I think that there's a huge, what's the word? That there's a level of authenticity in self-published and independent writing or in indie writing that I feel almost gets lost upon in trad publishing just because, and I'm not saying this as a like to dismiss indie authors, so I apologize for what's about to come out of my mouth. But a lot of indie authors are writing not to market or make millions of dollars. A lot of indie authors are writing because they have a story to tell. And I think the authenticity of what they're trying to say really stands out. There's a level of rawness in indie writing that, like I find that some trad published books are so refined, which is good because they're writing to a very specific market. But that refinement almost takes away from the authenticity of the actual story and the characters and the style. And I kind of like the ruggedness that comes with, or the amount of times I've read an indie book over the last 2, 3 years where I'm getting towards the end and I'm like, they might kill the protagonist. I don't know. it's an absolute coin toss. And I think
Yeah.
leaving your reader in that level of suspense and having the drama rise and rise because you don't have a what's the word? You don't have a template to follow. It's whatever you want it to be because it's your story. And obviously, you have sequels. You want people to read more of what you write, so you don't want to just completely screw the reader. Um, but at the same time, you can go in whatever direction you want. And I think that that's a really, really powerful tool that's often overlooked.
Yeah, there's no gatekeepers. I mean,
That's
the
a good word.
gatekeeper
Yeah.
becomes the reader, and they either like it or they don't. You don't have all these different channels, and you don't have to, there's no politics in it either.
Mhm.
And that's really nice. It politics in the sense of dealing with people and
Yeah.
their opinions. um, and it's a lot more work, like you were saying. You kind of have to be a business person and a
Mhm.
writer, creative. Um, and I think that's not for everybody, but it's there for everybody.
Yeah. Well, that's the biggest thing is that self-publishing has removed the barriers to entry. All you need now is time and something to write with. Um, and for better or worse, it has removed the barriers of entry. Anyone can write. Um, we've seen both ends of the spectrum there, and that's okay. I think give everyone a voice, and then everyone finds the voice that they like from that. But you gotta have everyone's gotta have an opportunity to. And to your point, I wanted to ask about this because, like you said, there is no, oh, what's the word? Like, there's no, like, this is back to your previous point of no one's waiting on your book, so you have to create your own timelines and everything. This way you stay motivated and whatnot. When it comes to marketing your book, how do you go about it? Because obviously, Fables and Falsehoods was, I want to say it was published end of September.
Beginning of September.
Beginning of September, apologies. It was published beginning of September, and you have your next story coming out February 10th. Write it down. Um, how have you gone about marketing that? How have you found the reception to be, the importance of Amazon reviews, and Goodreads reviews, and all that as an author?
Yeah, so I sent out probably about 50 ARC copies of
Mhm.
Fables. Um, and I think overall I've had like 7 across various platforms that reviewed, which is actually a pretty high percentage for
Okay.
ARCs. Um, so that was part of it, was doing that push. I've done a little bit less of that on with book 2, Snowdrops and
Mhm.
Schemes. Um, but right now it's a lot of just low content um, videos, imagery,
Yeah.
and hooks for the book, trying to just pull in new readers because I found that people that find the book really like it,
Yeah.
but it's hard to just break through the noise. So a lot of social media marketing. I wouldn't start paying for ads until 3 books are out. So probably
Mhm.
this fall, um, because book 3 comes out
Sheesh, you're
tentatively
really you're really
in
going
November.
for it. You're gonna have 3 books out within the span of a year.
Yeah, a little more than a year. It'll be November,
That's
but
exciting though.
yeah. So
Is
yeah, I
it
have I have my marketing or my publication pretty much scheduled out at this point.
okay? So
So
you're working on, and remind me, is this a 4 book series? Because I'm just thinking because it's 4 seasons.
yes. So
Okay.
it right now it's planned as a quartet and then potentially a second quartet, but I'm going to take a gap between the two.
Okay. And then that's one of the things when it comes to marketing books that I always find really interesting is that if you're doing a series, you only ever have to market the first book.
Yeah.
Because if people like the first book, which, they do, then they just pick up the second book. So obviously you have all these other books you can create content with, but at the end of the day, this is the one that's going to bring people in.
Yeah,
So
absolutely.
it is quite an interesting, like from a business perspective, how it all works.
Yeah, and eventually, hopefully, there'll be other entry points to other series.
Mhm.
Um, but that's part of why you see a lot of series in self-publishing
Yeah.
because you want that return on investment for that ad to be high enough to be able to run them consistently.
Mhm. So, excuse me. One of the questions I had was whether or not you're a planner or a pantser, because the biggest thing I had throughout the story was I was sitting there going, Logan's a bad guy, Logan's a bad guy, Logan's a bad guy. What was the thought process throughout?
So I I say I'm a plotter,
Mhm.
an architect. I like
Oh, I
architect
like that. I
as
like
a
that. Okay.
that's the my preferred one. But
Mhm.
um the way I think of it is I write an outline. It's usually decently solid, although I kind of like build the scaffolding as I'm going. So
Mhm.
I do a thin outline and a thick outline. Thin outline, it runs through the whole story. It's kind of general arcs and all of that. And then I do a chapter by chapter outline, which I usually do a couple into the book, and then I
Mhm.
wait to see where I'm at by that point. And then each chapter I'm adding to the next chapter. So
Right.
I don't ever want to have a blank page because that'll
Okay.
stall me. I want to go to the next chapter and there already be a blurb of this is where you're going next. So I'm kind of like laying the road right in front of my feet. That's how it feels whenever I'm doing this. But a lot of it happens in the second draft,
Yeah.
fixing it, making sure I'm putting setting things up. I didn't know actually the killer changed between the first and second
Hit me. Hit
draft.
me. Tell us, please.
I can't remember who it was initially, but it definitely. Oh, wait, no. Okay. Are we good with spoilers?
Oh, yeah, yeah,
Okay,
yeah. Hit me with it.
great, great. It was initially Father Jenkins, but that was too on the
Really?
nose. And I was like, I can't have it be him. Um, so I shifted it around and originally, Mr. Oh, what did I change his name? I changed some names. So
That's valid. Yeah, and
if
you'll have to
I'm
forgive me. It's been a few months since I've read
No,
it, so
you're
I'm like going
fine.
through.
I want to make sure that I got the right name because the second death,
Yeah.
the
Because it was
character
it was Farmer Jenkins.
father.
It was father, not farmer. It was Father Jenkins. It was his like his closest confidant or whatnot who passed, wasn't it?
It
Oh man,
was
I might be
so
totally
the
off.
original death was Harper Foster, the baker.
The baker. Yeah.
And then it was I'm trying to make sure I get his name right because I changed his name. Um I changed a couple names because they were too close to real names.
I see.
Um
You can't have your friends know you killed them off.
Not my friends, but people that really exist.
Oh yeah.
Mr. Ward. Okay, I did change it to Mr. Ward.
Okay.
Mr. Ward, he did not die in the first one.
Okay.
So that whole line, the idea of why it happened was in the
Mhm.
first book, but he didn't die in the first in the first iteration.
Right.
So a lot changed in that draft. I do a lot of heavy lifting in
Mhm.
my second draft. Yeah. So
Which I think that's the way to do it, though. I feel like the first draft, just basically word vomit on the paper, get as much down as you can. And then you go through, you clean it up, you tie in loose ends, you connect everything. But the hardest thing for a writer to do is to just write.
yeah, and I like drafting as fast as humanly possible. I mean, I don't remember how long it took me for Fables, but for book two, it took me less than a month to draft it.
That's
The first
crazy.
draft.
Is it the same length as Fables?
Yeah, almost exactly.
Okay, okay.
I mean, I can't show it to you very well, but they're like the same thickness.
I was gonna say I have it here. It's
Yeah.
about at 5.5 by 8.5. It's about 220 pages.
I'll say Snowdrops and Schemes is just slightly thicker. It's
Oh,
probably less.
the sequel's called Snowdrops and Schemes.
Yes.
Okay, okay.
Yeah, so we got a theme with the names.
No, I'm picking up on it.
Yeah.
I'm so excited. I didn't realize it was gonna end up being I knew there was a sequel coming. I didn't realize it was gonna be a 4-part series. I think
Yeah.
in part I'm a very literal reader. So and that might be English wasn't my first language. So I think there's like an element of it where unless I'm explicitly told what's going on, I might miss it. And which is what makes the curation aspect fun because Steve will go into all the little weeds and the nitty-gritty of this and that. And I'll just sit there and be like, Steve, the curtains were blue because the curtains were blue. You're overthinking this. Like
It's good because the way I tried to build this is that there are red herrings that everyone's going to pick up on.
Mhm, mhm.
There are other ones that it's only the people that are really trying, and they might actually go further afield because they're picking up on things that most people wouldn't.
Now the question is, if a reader picks up on something that wasn't intended, but it works, do you buy into it as the author?
Oh, absolutely. I
Yes,
mean, yeah,
that's where I stand.
in the writing process as I'm sending it to my alpha readers and all of that, there are many times when they're like, "Oh, you're doing this here." And I'm like, "Well, I wasn't, but now you think I am, so I'm just going to lean into that here."
Absolutely.
And
It-
I trust my subconscious that it was working on it for me.
yeah, no, I like that. I think that's the way to go about it. And then obviously because I haven't seen it, because unfortunately it's the blurriness of it, is the sequel and all your stories will have the same kind of style of artwork, handmade, all that kind of stuff. That's really neat.
Yeah. Yeah, it has the same art at the beginning of each chapter. I mean, obviously the cover's different, but
Right.
stylistically it's similar. You're
Okay.
probably going to see an evolution through my art as I go along though. So,
It's always my favorite, whether it be in trad published books or in regular books or indie novels. I've been in the game for too long. Like seeing the artist photo over time change, or like seeing the artwork evolve. It's cool because at the end of the day, if you're writing, because we featured one author, his name was Phil Williams, months ago, or maybe a year ago now. It's been a while. And the book we ended up featuring was his very first novel. And this man has gone on to write 30 some odd novels. And there's a level of rawness that comes with the first novel that gets, I don't want to say pushed away, but it gets refined over time because you become better at this, worse at that. You specialize. So it's interesting to see because it's not just your artist style changes, your writing style will change. The way you develop characters will change, as it should. And we evolve and change over time, and it happens in our art as well.
yeah, I learned something from every single book. I'm working on the third one as we speak, and
Mhm.
it's kicking my butt. It didn't take me a month to write. I stopped halfway through and have to go back and rewrite a significant
Mhm.
portion of it because it wasn't working. And you hit all sorts of roadblocks. Even though I have a pretty tight schedule, I give myself a decent amount of grace room because I know
Yeah,
anything that can go wrong will go wrong. Um,
Murphy's laws are real pain.
yeah. So, yeah, it's definitely interesting because I learned something new about myself, and sometimes it's through the characters.
Mhm.
It's an emotional thing that they're going through, and it's like, oh, maybe I haven't dealt with that in my own life.
Yeah,
Maybe I should just take a beat and not work on this right now. Which,
there's
I
nothing
mean,
nothing wrong with that.
yeah, you write stories, at least I write stories for myself first. I love when other people love them and I love sending them out to the world, but I get to have them first. And I love that because I can just play around. I get to
Yeah,
play. That's part of my job is to play.
and I
So,
I think that's the best way to go about it. I think the best stories are the ones that authors wrote, not because they're trying to make X amount of dollars, but because it's truly a story that they've been wanting to write. And those are the ones that come off authentic. Those are the ones that linger. And I think that's what you want. You want to read that story that 6 months later you walk into your bedroom and go, oh wow, yeah, I still remember that one scene and that one moment. And that's the beauty of it. I hate being that person. I'm looking, we have a minute and 10 seconds left. The Zoom timers. So I want to make sure that people who liked Fables and Falsehoods can figure out the best way to get a hold of you and all that. So if I liked Fables and Falsehoods, the sequel comes out on February 10th. We're going to put all this in the description. What's the best way they can get a hold of you and keep up with what you're working on?
yeah, so I have a website, ritaevermoore.com. There's a newsletter on there you can sign up for, and I post everything that is coming out soon. I post for ARC readers, so if you want to be a part of that, I put
Mhm.
that on my newsletter. Um, the book is for pre-order right now up on Amazon and Barnes and Noble. It's also going to be in KU, Kindle Unlimited once that publishes on the 10th. And then I'm on social media. I think Rita Evermoore writes on Threads and Instagram. I'm pretty much on all of the platforms, though I don't really use
Wonderful.
X or Blue Sky that much.
Yeah, no one uses Blue Sky. And I'm pretty sure X is all bots. But on that
Yep.
note, we got 5 seconds left. Thank you everyone for joining us. Thank you so much, Rita. Lovely to speak with you. Fables and Falsehoods. Please check it out.